This is the Untold Italy travel podcast, and you're listening to episode number 207.
Ciao a tutti and benvenuti to Untold Italy, the travel podcast where you go to the towns and villages, mountains and lakes, hills and coastlines of Bella Italia. Each week, your host, Katy Clarke, takes you on a journey in search of magical landscapes, history, culture, wine, gelato, and of course, a whole lot of pasta. If you're dreaming of Italy and planning future adventures there, you've come to the right place.
Ciao everyone, how is your trip planning going? I can only judge by all the activity on our websites and social media that you're up to the eyeballs in it if you're travelling to Italy this year. And of course, accommodation is probably the thing you're most stuck on. So I thought I would bring back our great friend, author Corinna Cooke, to have a chat about accommodation options, things to consider when deciding your stays, and some of the quirks of Italian hotels and booking requirements, because there are a few. We did do a similar episode prior to COVID, but I have to say some things have changed a lot. The prices, for one. Wow, the major cities are getting very pricey these days, and if you're a regular traveller who goes at different times of the year, the surge pricing is real, my friends. You can really see a big difference in how much the prices change over the years, over the months, should I say. Now, one hotel where I stay in Florence is €300 per night in March and €1,000 in October. Never a better reason to travel in the less popular months, I reckon. Anyway, now seemed a good time to take another look at booking accommodation and sharing our up-to-date info with you, and I'm delighted that Corinna is here to do that with me. So let's dive in. Bentornata, Corinna. Welcome back to the Untold Italy podcast.
Ciao, Katy. Ciao, tutti. Thank you for having me back. It's wonderful to get to chat with you again. Last time I saw you and chatted with you was in Rome.
I know, we were having that yummy dinner in Trastevere and it was so much fun. It's always fun to go to Trastevere, and it was kind of a weird sort of timing, wasn't it? Because it was the end of August and for some reason it wasn't so busy. I feel like we just were there on the cusp of the busyness of September and the sort of the slight lull of August, and it was really lovely evening, wasn't it?
It was lovely, wasn't it? Yeah, because just 3 or 4 days later, it was back on, full on busy again. But no, it was a perfect moment, and we hit the weather just right as well. It was beautiful to be outside. When we sat up on the rooftop and we had aperitivi with Liv. Oh, I loved it, the whole thing. Gorgeous, gorgeous.
Yeah, it was so brilliant to see you. So what have you been up to since then? What's been happening?
So I've had my Glam Italia tours. So I had a bunch of tours back to back and then got back to the US in late October, working on new book projects and everything. And then I'm actually heading back to Italy in about 48 hours from now. I'll be back there for 10 days. Actually doing some personal fun things I've been wanting to do and just haven't been able to, just because of how the time has all worked out. So be doing some of that, doing some good eating, and then getting on a plane and getting back here in time to buy a Christmas tree, get the house ready, and go to the airport and pick up my son for Christmas. So,
oh, amazing. So, Corinna, for those of you who don't know, maybe new listeners, is our regular on our show, and I can't even remember all the episodes because there's been quite a few with Corinna. But maybe you can introduce yourself very quickly to say hi and what you do and, why you're interested in Italy.
So I'm Corinna Cooke, and I'm possibly best known for writing the Glam Italia How to Travel Italy guidebook series. So I love traveling in Italy. It's my great passion in life. I believe in doing a kind of sustainable travel, rather than being in mass tourism travel. And so my books are all about showing you places that the tour buses don't go to, and all these great places that are right around the corner from where all the crowds are, but you're 500 meters down the street seeing something that's equally brain bending and there's no crowds there. So that's kind of what I'm about. And then I do small group tours for women called the Glam Italia tours. I do a handful of those per year. And yeah, I live in the States at the moment. I'm originally from New Zealand, and who knows where I'll be living next. Fingers crossed. I'm working on a bunch of things. I'm like a juggler. I always have all these balls up in the air trying to keep everything going. But yeah, there may be some other moves happening in the not too distant future if all the planets line up correctly. So
Watch this space, everyone. So Corinna and I spend a lot of time online researching accommodation, and we have had a podcast on accommodation in the past, but I think it's definitely time for an update because, since we've had the pandemic, which shall not be named, things changed a bit in Italy. And I think it's really worth exploring, what are your options when you go there and when you're planning your trip, because let's face it, accommodation is probably the second biggest, even could even be bigger cost than your flights in some cases, the biggest part of your trip. And so you want to get it right, and you want to make sure you make the choices that are right for your trip and the people who are traveling. So, the way that I travel is very different to the way Corinna travels, is very different to the way other people travel. So we thought we'd just go through a few tips to make sure that you start your planning for 2024 off right and you're ready to go when you land in beautiful Roma or Milan or wherever you're landing.
Absolutely. So I think one thing to think about when you're at the very beginning part of planning your trip is to have fewer moves rather than more. So I like to stay a minimum of 3 nights in one location, ideally 4 nights, because most people, I think when we're coming to Italy for the first time, we want to get up and down the country and see a whole bunch of things. But you don't want to be in that situation where every couple of nights you're packing up, moving, going to the next place. So I would say when we're choosing our accommodation, let's just keep that in the back of our minds. I think people probably, what would you say the average trip length is? 14 nights, 10 nights?
14 nights. And I actually heard a really interesting stat from one of our partners recently that the average stay in Rome is 2.4 nights. And I was really shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, what are these people doing? They can't see anything in that time. They can't experience the eternal city in 2.4 days. I thought that was quite low, actually.
Very low. And, Rome is my favorite city in the world. So I'm always shocked when people spend such a short amount of time there. And you tend to find when people spend a short amount of time there, if you get talking to them, say, what did you think of Rome? They didn't always love it. And you ask them, well, what did you do? And they just hit the places the tour buses go and then they're out. So all they've seen is overcrowded and eaten at places that are very expensive, and they haven't had the real Rome experience.
You're right. You need to spend a decent amount of time, and you need to pick the location in the cities really carefully according to your itinerary and how you like to travel, because there's lots of different options. And, I always like, if someone's new to Rome, as an example, I always like to say, just stay in the centre, but there's parts of the centre that I probably wouldn't stay, and the reason I say the centre is because you can walk everywhere. But that's not 100% true for all parts of the centre. So I really like to stay around the Campo di Fiori area and around the Pantheon area, Piazza Navona, because I find that's kind of equidistant to the Vatican museums and Colosseum. And I like that area. That's my area of choice. How about you?
I'm Trastevere. I stay there all the time because, again, it's walkable to everywhere. And you're not by any big monuments. So one of the things that I would say to people who are planning a trip, whether you're planning on going to Rome or you're going to Florence or like whatever city it is, first of all, I would say look at where the big monuments are. So in this case, let's say the Colosseum, the Trevi Fountain, the Spanish Steps, and don't stay there. Like stay somewhere else. Because what happens is the big monuments are where all the mass tourism goes. So it's always going to be crowded there. The cost of everything is going to be much higher. So just simple things like walking down the street to go have a coffee in the morning, which is one of the great pleasures of being in Italy. You're going to be surrounded by crowds and you're going to pay a lot more for that coffee than if you're just a few blocks away from there. The pickpockets know to hang out around those places. So when you're sitting outside trying to have a beautiful meal al fresco, and you've just got a non-stop swarm of people coming past you. You're paying a whole lot more than you would otherwise be paying, and you're having to be hyper vigilant because all the pickpockety types know that this is the great prowling area. So I would suggest not being immediately in those places. Just be back a little bit. I mean, there's tons of places near the Colosseum, and in Rome, we're talking about walking 5 minutes. We're not talking about being clear across town. Or if you're in Florence, for example, if you're right by the Duomo or right by Palazzo Vecchio or whatever, I think that would be an absolute nightmare.
I did have a reason for staying in Florence right near the Piazza della Signoria last time. And, it was like a little bit out the way, but it was literally around the corner from from everything. But if you're aware and you know that you're making that choice, then you're forewarned, right? I made that choice with my eyes wide open because my daughter wanted to go to Florence and we had very limited time there and we only had 2 nights there, we broke the other rule. But I think, that was the style of the trip that we were on, but totally agree. Now, sorry, I interrupted.
And I was going to say, it can be very noisy too. So you might find some fabulous hotel and the window looks out over the piazza or whatever, or you've got an Airbnb that is just dreamy. And by the way, I call all vacation rentals Airbnbs. But if you're right in the heart of it, it gets noisy, and it's noisy very, very late at night because things are going much later than they are in my neighborhood here in Phoenix. That's for sure. So, you want to think some of that stuff out. And so I always suggest, you want to be close enough that you can walk around and see all the things you want to see. But just that little bit back where it's going to be more kind of local oriented and not so noisy, and where you can meander down the street and have a cup of coffee surrounded by Italians speaking Italian, and it's somewhere pretty and you're paying €1.50 for your cappuccino instead of €5 for your cappuccino. And where the croissant or whatever you're having was actually made there or in one of the places nearby. It didn't come in from a factory.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think definitely that there's the pros and cons of staying in the centre. So, for example, if it was a first trip, I wouldn't be staying out. There's some nice hotels, but they're quite far out. I'm thinking there's ones, I know a lot of people there's one in Trastevere that has a very nice pool, the Gran Miglia, but it's on the hill in Trastevere. So you can't actually walk that many places from there. So it's also, you have to think about really what amenities you want as well and balance it out from there.
Be in the historic centre, but just not right by the Spanish Steps, Trevi Fountain, Colosseum. You're going to have a very different experience if you're just a little bit back. And I always say to people, read all the reviews, read right through it, and you're going to start seeing people talk about how it was really loud or it was really whatever, or, oh my goodness, we were, 2 blocks from this big place, but where we were, it was so quiet and it was gorgeous, and we did this and we did that and we ate at this place and the waiter was called that. You can really read into reviews and you start seeing the same thing happening all over and over and over. I had some friends that stayed in Rome. I want to say it was at the Waldorf. It was one of those hotels that's out and you can't walk to any. I mean, yes, there were big fluffy towels and great bathrobes, and they had some kind of American breakfast or whatever. So those things were good, but you can get that anywhere. But every time they wanted to come into town to do anything, it was a car ride in, car ride out. And the reality of that is, say you're walking down the street and you see something you want to buy, clothing or shoes or ceramics or whatever, and you buy it. Well, if you're staying out, you're now carrying that all day long. Whereas when you're staying in the historic center of any of these towns, you can actually buzz home at some point, drop them off, chill out for a little bit, cool down, have a drink, and then come back out again. So I do recommend, especially in these bigger cities, being a little bit more central, just not on top of the big monuments.
I did splurge last year and stayed in the Piazza della Rotunda, because I wanted to stay near my favourite building. And oh my gosh, Corinna, this was so funny. People make mistakes. Even with all my experience, this was an epic fail, right? So what I did was I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna book into this hotel." It was in April. I didn't think it would be too busy, and I was arriving on the train at about 4 PM on a Sunday. Well, I got the taxi, and the taxi driver literally had to drive through a crowd of people to get me to my hotel. Oh my God. If you had any sort of claustrophobia, it was not going to be fun. You know, I was fine once I was in my room and I could look out and I was watching all the crowds, you know, below, but it gave me no incentive to leave.
And then things like if you go downstairs to go sit outside and have a spritz, you're going to pay a lot more money for a spritz that's not a very good spritz because it's geared towards mass tourism. You're probably going to get a bowl of chips or something like lame with it. Whereas if you're just like a little bit further back from the main crowd centers, you're going to find that the quality of everything goes up. And I'm all about that aperitivo. I'm all about where we have aperitivo and what snacks come with it and all of that.
It's a beautiful area, and I don't regret that decision. And I also knew what I was getting into, really. I didn't think it was going to be that busy, but I knew it would be busy. But the term never again now springs to mind. And I also know where to go near there for the bars, etc. But yeah, I won't be going back. And it's a real shame. And if anyone wants to stay there and they have that desire to stay right near the Pantheon like I did, then you will want to stay at, this is actually the oldest hotel in Rome. It's called Antico Albergo del Sole al Pantheon, and it's a lovely hotel. And the people, it's very charming. It's a small hotel, but yeah, it's not in the right spot for me now. I can't stay there. I also stay in Trastevere because of the location and all of that. But I think Trastevere is a good spot if you're familiar with Rome, or maybe it's your second visit, or if you are staying there, stay closer to the river so you can have access to everything quite easily.
Yeah, maybe not up on the hill your first time.
No.
But I love it because you can walk to everywhere and it's kind of atmospheric. Well, actually, throughout the historic centre is atmospheric and you really feel like you're having a Rome experience. I spent a lot of time in Florence this summer, which I haven't been staying in Florence for the last few years.
Mm.
And we stayed over in Oltrarno, and we were back over by Piazza del Carmine, so around where the Carraia Bridge is, and then tucking back in. And it was great because it was like a tale of two cities. There was this one town that was like 8 minutes walk from our apartment to Ponte Vecchio. And Ponte Vecchio, it seemed like at midnight it was still packed. There was just so many people, but yet even just walking down towards the bridge, there was very few people. And then across the bridge, it was just a whole different world. And, you're still close enough that you can walk to everywhere. So you're not like a ways. Like I wouldn't want to walk a half hour to have to get to all the action. I like being a little bit closer than that. Mm. But you're far enough away that you can have quiet piazzas and have some more quiet time. So yeah, I do think that figuring out that location and spending some time on that, like look at areas that you think you might like, that you've heard about, and then start doing little circles around them when you're choosing where you want to stay, and do some review reading so that you can figure out that you're in a place that's going to work for the kind of trip that you want. If you're someone that wants to be shopping, you don't want to be far away from where all the shops are. That's not your ideal trip, or if you're someone that wants to be hitting every single museum in town, you don't want to be way out away from the museums, and spending half your day getting in. So things like that, you really want to figure it out for your personal trip as to where you should be. And then we need to figure out what type of accommodation you want.
I'm just going to say, before we jump onto that, on our website, we have a ton of accommodation guides. And so what they're kind of like the best places to stay in Rome. So we break each neighbourhood down and all the pros and cons of them. So we have ones for pretty much all the major areas that tourists visit, but we also have ones for places like Verona and smaller.
Wonderful.
So if you need advice, I will put some links into our show notes for that. But yeah, I like to give people useful information because you're not going to find that without a load of research.
Yeah, exactly. And when you haven't been before, I mean, it's like if I was going to Shanghai, I would have no idea where I'm supposed to go, like no idea whatsoever. So it's really good, especially for people who haven't been before, if they can go and get that info from you. That's really helpful.
So, yeah, on the types of accommodation, I think that's another really important distinction because people have a preferred style of travel, but it's very interesting. I was working with a client recently and she said, we always like to stay in Airbnbs. And I was like, okay. So it's interesting. I think it depends as well on where you're going and what's available as an example. So what do you think, Corinna? Like, where do you start?
My personal style of travel is I like being in vacation rentals. And I call all of them Airbnbs. So it doesn't mean I'm going through Airbnb, but that type of rental apartment. Because for me, the things that I want to do are I want to be able to come home at the end of the day into a homey environment where I've got room to sit down, where I'm not having to sit on my bed at the end of the day. Like, I've got a living room where I've got kitchen access, where I just have room to breathe. So for me, that works really well. Also, I personally enjoy being able to go to the food markets and shop and get bits and pieces and have some of my meals at home and some of my meals out. Now, remembering that I'm typically there for 8 weeks at a time. So if you're eating 3 meals a day for 8 weeks at a time, it gets really stressful.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And your body just starts to go, no.
So I love being able to wander to the local fruit and vegetable market and see what's seasonal, what's happening right now, and talk to the vendors, and they'll figure out something for me about, you should make this, like, and I really enjoy that, and I like having the flexibility to eat in, to eat out, to just have space to live and breathe. And I also find that type of accommodation puts me into the local life. I'm having to go out and interact with local people, and I really feel more assimilated into local Italian life, which is part of why I travel. Like, I love that. Whereas if I stay in a hotel, everybody's paid to be nice to me. So it's like they're not being my friend because they like me. They're being polite to me because they're paid to be polite to me. So there's a difference there. And then also for me personally, I feel too confined in a small hotel room, and not everywhere is going to have big suites that you can live in, stay in. And they're not always going to be in budget either. So, you go backwards and forwards on what's going to be the right thing for you. I have other friends that are like, I would rather die than stay in an Airbnb. And they say to me, I work all the time. I work at home. I've got my house at home that I'm taking care of. When I go on a trip, I want to be staying in a hotel where I don't have to think of anything, and people are going to come and replace the toilet paper and towels and clean the place every day. So, there's no one right way.
No, there's not. And, I think, with you're staying longer times in places as well. So you've got time to settle in and, make yourself comfortable. For me, because my trips are typically a bit shorter than yours and I'm dashing in and out, I really like a hotel. And especially in a big city, I like a hotel because I love that sense of peace. And I don't want to have to be dealing with key exchanges and working out how things work. So, yeah, different styles of travel. Everyone has different preferences. And I really I love a charming boutique hotel. I love going somewhere where there's frescoes on the wall, and my kids love Italian breakfast, which is it's very famous. So if you get a proper Italian breakfast, it's the big kahuna breakfast. It's everything. It's the eggs, it's the bacon. That's not really Italian, but they offer that as well. Cakes on just multiple cakes, fruit, everything. So we typically go for the breakfast and hope that we don't have to eat 2 other meals a day. So, like if you really, want to consider that too, if you get your big breakfast in the morning and then you get snacks or eat throughout the day and then get dinner, you can save some money on food.
Well, and I have certain places where I really love staying in hotels. So I was just in Sicily, out in the Aeolian Islands, staying on Lipari. And there's this one hotel that I stay at every time. I've been staying there now for 12 years. So it's been like a long time. but the positioning of it's got this huge rooftop terrace with lovely chairs and everything that you can sit up there and have a glass of wine. And it faces directly across the water at Stromboli. And I always think if the volcano goes off, I want to be able to sit on the rooftop with a glass of wine and watch the show, But they do a beautiful breakfast. And then another place that I always will stay in hotels is when I'm in Matera. I like to stay in the Sassi and stay in a cave hotel. And that experience is just so glorious. Like I wouldn't miss it for the world.
It's a really unique experience. Like we can't have many places, maybe Cappadocia in Turkey or somewhere like that. But Matera is definitely another place for like a hotel. And, when we were recently up in the Dolomites, they have these different styles of hotels up there. They're very kind of alpine chalet-like, and they typically include half board, which is it's almost like a blast from the past. Because a lot of them are quite remote, you need to have your dinner there. So that was another unique experience too. And I have to say, by the end of that, I really was a bit specced out. But, I mean, they did offer different options, but I was always trying to eat local, and the local food is very, traditionally Tyrolean style. But hotels, if you can find a great family-run hotel, that's for me, a boutique-y, small family-run hotel, they are wonderful as well. So I prefer not to stay in the bigger chains. I feel like I want to have the experience that I'm in Italy. So for me, especially on our personal travels, we'll definitely stay at smaller family-run hotels.
There you go. I love that experience. And then I also love mixing it up a little bit so that I'm doing some of my trip is staying inside the big cities and some of it is out in the countryside. So staying on an agriturismo or masseria down south, that's another glorious experience to have, where you really do have that idyllic Italian country experience,
Yeah, and for the listeners that haven't kind of just joined us and maybe haven't listened to a lot of episodes of Untold Italy, there is a whole episode on agriturismo from our friends that have an agriturismo in Umbria, and they tell you all about the experience of staying there. And it is really charming and beautiful, and part of the whole experience is you are surrounded by the countryside, and also a lot of the regions mandate that they need to provide local produce as part of their offering at the agriturismo. You get your accommodation and local produce as well for your breakfast or dinner if they offer it. So it's a beautiful thing. I love a masseria. I love one.
There's two that I use down in Puglia outside of Rotondo.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite of the two, they put on the most amazing breakfast. And it's one of those things where the land has been in the family for a billion generations. And inside the town of Rotondo, one of the streets is named after their family. And there's all these different palazzi that have, attachment to their history. But it's just beautiful being on their property. And then, they make these glorious breakfasts every morning. And then you're eating out every evening. And then the other one that I stay on is another gorgeous property, but it is completely self-catered, so there's no breakfast there. But I still enjoy going to the supermarket. I mean, I get a kick out of foreign supermarkets, but it's also fun to be able to go and buy up some bits and pieces and just make your own breakfast when you feel like it, having what you like to have and being able to piece out a little bit before you take on the day. But one of the things to think about if you're staying on an agriturismo or a masseria, so that is a country stay, is you have to have wheels. So you really need to have a rental car so you can come and go, because you've got to be able to get off the property to go see things and then to go out to eat. Another thing to think of too is if you're doing that, there has to be a designated driver. So if you're going to go to a winery or something, you either have to hire a driver to take you there and back, or somebody doesn't get to drink. And in Italy, they changed the rules, I think it was this year, to 0% alcohol. So if you get a breathalyzer, you can't have had any alcohol. It's something to factor into your equation. So you might be thinking, I want to have this dreamy trip staying in the country on this beautiful farm. And I look out and it's vineyards and olive groves and rolling hills and all of that. But the reality of it is that your dream might also be to be sitting outside, having a long Italian dinner, drinking copious glasses of wine. Well, now how are you getting back to this masseria?
And the driving situation is very interesting because I know I've heard a lot of people ask for private drivers, particularly in Tuscany. You're looking at upwards of €500 a day for a private driver. And depending on where you are in Tuscany, they might not be interested because things are spread out. I know this sounds strange to our Anglo-Saxon ears, but like if it's not convenient, it's not going to be available. So you do need to think about how you're going to get around. It's a really good point, Corinna.
And with the hiring a NCC driver, it's total number of kilometers. So you might be out in the countryside outside of Greve, for example, and your driver is starting from Florence. The clock starts when he turns that ignition on. So it's all the kilometers to come get you, go do whatever things that you're doing, but then all the kilometers back. So it can be quite expensive. But I wouldn't even entertain the idea of going to wineries without having a driver. It's really boring, if you're a wine drinker, to be in Italy and go to a winery and sit there and have lemon soda while everybody else is like knocking back all these different, different red wines. That's the voice of experience talking here.
I know. Well, my husband doesn't drink, so
you've got a built-in designated driver. That's so great.
Yeah, that wasn't by design, but it has come in handy many times. But yeah, it's really true. And I mean, that's an advantage of going on a tour too, right? Because you have that all sorted out.
It's all taken care of. Absolutely. And another thing I was just thinking of too, when you're doing a country stay, something to think about is that you're driving in the dark. Like driving back onto an agriturismo or back out to a masseria if you're down in the south. You're now at this point going down old country roads with no lights, which doesn't seem like such a big deal until you're doing it. Like driving along a old country road, and there's potholes and there's everything, and you can only see as far as your lights ahead of you will show you. It can be a little bit hair-raising. So, if you're someone that would find that stressful, that's something to factor into your equation as well.
Yeah, definitely. But if you can do it because it's amazing. A lot of them will have swimming pools. They're like a little mini luxury resort, some of them. Some of these agriturismos and masserias, it's not like a farmhouse like you think. They are working farms, but they have put a lot of effort, a lot of them, into making it a very special occasion. I've very, very rarely been let down by agriturismi, actually.
Yeah.
Like I've stayed in some amazing ones in Sicily, in Puglia. In Sicily, they're called Baglio. So you have to also know what to search for, right? Because it's not so easy, but they are seriously some of the best accommodation I've stayed in ever.
It's such a glorious experience. On my Umbria tours, we stay in the country, and what we do is every night we eat in because it's got a beautiful outdoor area, and you're sitting outside and you're surrounded by all these gorgeous trees, and you've got no light pollution, so the sky is full of stars, and you're sitting outside eating beautiful Umbrian food and drinking Umbrian wine, and really life's pretty good when you're doing that.
It is pretty good. The other type of accommodation that we haven't talked about is B&B, bed and breakfast, and you can find some very charming ones. They are like a little small family hotel, and definitely don't discount those. You can find some really beautiful options in the cities and in the smaller cities as well. I think that's probably where they're really great, is in the maybe not the biggest cities, but the smaller secondary cities like the Lucas and Arezzo and places like that.
Yeah, and you'll often find places that have got frescoes in them and that are just decorated in a way that you can't decorate for a major hotel.
Yeah.
You can get that not more authentic, but more personalized perhaps. They're a wonderful option. And there's also those youth hostels as well. Like we never talk about those. I mean, it's not something that I would do, but the younger version of me probably would have. My friend Linda has one in Rome, just Beehive in Rome. That is a really popular youth hostel. Obviously, like everyone's about 100 years younger than I am.
Not necessarily, though, because not so long ago, well, actually it was quite a while ago, before kids, I did do a trip around Europe and I stayed in youth hostels for the reason that I was travelling solo and I wanted to meet people. they've changed a lot since when I was traveling, in my 20s. They really are quite good. Like, you can get a private room with a private bathroom. I mean, you obviously pay a bit extra, but then you have the communal facilities where people are meeting, and there are a lot of solo travelers, so you can meet people. And I think it's a really, really great way to meet people, actually, if you're traveling solo.
And it's also, you're meeting people like you who are also
Mm-hmm.
traveling solo, and they're going to be telling you, oh, we just went to this place, it was really cool. Or, maybe they'll invite you to come along with them for the day or whatever. Like, it's just, I think it's a wonderful option, especially when you're younger.
Yeah, and I know quite a few older people that do that style of travel too, simply because they want to, have that more convivial atmosphere rather than, being on their own traveling around. Yeah, so it's another really great one. I know a lot of other people, like, there's monastery stays as well. You can stay in these. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then also villas too. Like, I would love to stay in a monastery. I was looking at one place that was a former convent, and I'm thinking, gosh, like, lightning will come flying through the window and hit me.
I was chatting with my friend when we were in Rome, and she wanted to show me when she was traveling in her 20s. She stayed in a convent that's right near the Spanish Steps. And I was like, oh, that's unique, And I think she liked it because she was, on her own, a solo traveler. But I think the rule of that one is to check the terms and conditions, because at that convent they had a curfew of 10 o'clock.
Oh my goodness. There's others scattered around the country that have, it was originally a monastery or a convent, and now it's privately owned, and it's a nice little boutique-y, hotel-y kind of experience. So, I mean, and things like that can be really fun. And then also villas, like if you're traveling with your family, especially, or there's a group of you, it can be really fun to rent a villa, which I've done lots of times too. And not necessarily as expensive as you would think. It can often work out to be much more economical than staying in a equal caliber hotel, and you're in a villa and you're on the land, and half of them have got swimming pools, and you're really kind of in your Italy dream. Some friends of mine recently stayed in a villa in Bulgari on the Tuscan coast. And they were sending me these videos. They'd open the window. So first of all, like, walking into the room, and it's just ridiculous. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, how can this even exist? And then opening up the shutters and the windows, and the first thing you see is the vineyards in front of you. And then as you look to the further distance, there's the sea. And I'm like, wow. So again, you probably need a car or have a driver working for you. But it's another lovely option. And I think a lot of times people think, well, that would just be too expensive. But if there's a group of you, if it's your family, or if you've got a group of friends traveling, it can often be a really good deal.
Yeah, we've done it a couple of times, and it's been really fun, actually. But it just depends on the style of travel, how much time you've got, and, what you're prepared to do. Like you said, if someone's, has no interest in cooking when they're on holidays or vacation, then...
Well, sometimes it's nice to mix it up. And with some of the villas, you can pay for people to come in and cook, which is another option. But it's also nice to mix it up, like hotel a little bit, Airbnb a little bit, stay a few days on a masseria. And, if you're doing a 10, 12-day trip, that's not, you're moving around a few different places. That's actually really quite doable. And then you've had all kinds of different experiences.
That's right. Now, I think the thing is, though, you really need to understand what you're getting. Buyer beware, right? Because some things are not the same as what they are in your home and what you expect. And let me just say up front, as a caveat, if you want what you get at home, book into a chain hotel.
Yeah.
And avoid disappointment.
Across the board, there's so many differences, and there's certain things that, living here in America, for example, if I'm booking a hotel anywhere in America and I'm booking a room just for myself, it's going to have a queen size bed or a king size bed. Now, if I'm in Italy, and I keep making this mistake of booking a single room for like one person, and by the way, here's a hot tip for you. Even if it's just you, book a hotel room for two people, because if you book for one person, chances are you're going to be in a single bed. And it's a single bed that's narrower than the single beds we had growing up in New Zealand. So like that's one thing. They tend to, in Italy, have mattresses a lot firmer. And, of course, there are, there's changes to every rule. It's not 100% all the time. But in general, I think you're going to find that mattresses in Italy are a lot firmer than they are in the United States, like a lot firmer. So I have people complaining all the time about the mattresses are too hard, but like they don't have the box spring and I don't know what all the stuff we have, but it tends to be, they have those wooden slats and then mattresses on top of the wooden slats.
Although one place we stay in Emilia-Romagna, it was so funny. The guy was saying to me, since you've been here, I have tested out every mattress known available in Italy and I have chosen the best mattress. And he said, I don't even have one, but they are very good. But I think it's true. You can be a little bit shocked by those sort of differences. The number one thing that our Facebook community is known for, and this is like, I saw this today, that's my friend's French Facebook community that said, the Italy travel planning is really great, but there seems to be a preoccupation with washcloths.
Yeah, they don't have them. And you can go to the store to go try and buy one and you won't find one. So I always tell my tour travelers, if you're somebody that uses washcloths, like I use them to take my makeup off at night. I wash my face with a washcloth. So I bring them with.
But now, because before I would have said bring wipes, but I wouldn't have said bring wipes because they are terrible for the environment. But you can now get biodegradable wipes.
Ah, there you go. Well, I get these microfiber washcloths that dry out overnight. So if you're like packing your suitcase and leaving in the morning, you're not going to be packing a wet washcloth, smelly and nasty. But yeah, they don't have them. And in the States, if you're staying at a Airbnb or if you're staying in a hotel, there's going to be about 1,000 towels per person. There's like big fluffy towels stacked up and there's tons of them. In Italy, not so much. You're probably going to have one towel, like one bath towel, one hand towel, and one bidet towel per person.
Don't go there. Every bathroom has a bidet, everyone.
And that little towel, don't use that little towel on your face because its sole purpose in life is to dry people's bottoms. But so that's another thing that I notice with comments that I hear from people is that why is there only one towel per person? And it just is what it is. Also, they don't have dryers there. And I think, and this isn't me speculating, but I think that part of the one set of towels per person thing is that it's not like downstairs in the basement, everything gets laundered, gets thrown in the dryer, refolded and put up. It goes out to be laundered. I mean, hotels probably all send out to launder, but even in an Airbnb kind of environment, everything's being sent out to be laundered, so there's a cost involved. Maybe that has something to do with it, or maybe they just find us excessive with all of our towels.
But energy costs are really high there, and I think that's another good segue on to another topic, which is heating and air conditioning, because if you are staying in someone's apartment and in like a rental, you are subject to the local authority heating and cooling regulations, which you may not be familiar with. So in Italy, the local authorities tell you when you can turn your heating and your cooling on and how high.
For the building. So it's not about your individual apartment. It's, they have, what do you call those kind of radiators?
Central, yeah.
So it doesn't matter. Like, it's not your landlord trying to be cheap on you. The heating doesn't get turned on until November and it gets turned off in March. So if you're there in October and you have a cold snap, it's like bad luck. I was there in May. This May, it was the wettest May in 70-something years. It rained every single day until the 24th of May. It was the first day the sun came out, and oh my goodness. But, I live in Phoenix where it's very hot and very dry, and I thought I was going to die from cold. I didn't have big winter willies to put on, and you couldn't turn the heating on. And then I think some smaller hotels are limited as well.
So if that's really important to you, you need to stay in a hotel because you could be a bit disappointed if you're travelling in the shoulder seasons. Same with air conditioning. Famously, we did stay in an agriturismo, beautiful property, quite large. They had the air conditioning wedged onto 25 degrees, which in my book is heating, in the middle of summer. So we just turned it off. But if you're someone that loves an ice cold air conditioning, you need to reset your expectations if you don't want to stay at a major hotel.
Yeah, and even in the hotels, you can't guarantee that it's going to be good air conditioning. It's typically not air conditioning like it is here where I live. Although you get some places, like some of the apartments that I rent and everything, they have these really cool air conditioning units on the wall, and they will ice you right down. They'll make it really, really fast. But I mean, I've had hotel experiences in Italy where I thought I was going to die because the air conditioning's on and it's like some old man's blowing on you or something. Like it's just, you just cannot cool down. So it's something to think about. Even if a place says that it has air conditioning,
Yeah.
chances are it's not going to be like the air conditioning you have at home. You can say, well, I'll just have the windows open. They do get a lot of mosquitoes there too. And there's not, so here in Phoenix, all windows have those bug screen things on the windows. But in Italy, they typically don't. So it can be really hot and, you're stuck with not being able to have the windows open because of mosquitoes.
And also, if you're mobility challenged, you need to really check thoroughly, because apart from, like, there's the elevator issue. A lot of buildings don't have them. And also in the bathrooms, the shower might be over the bath. So you need to get into the bath.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
So double check. And even to get into the hotel, there's usually a few steps to get in. I know, like, my father, very mobility challenged, and, I mean, we did our best, but you can't check everything without actually going and eyeballing the place, and so we had some interesting moments with hotel steps. So there's a lot of things to kind of check for. The good thing is, if you book on some of the major booking platforms, you can actually, like, eliminate some of these things very quickly. I recommend doing that. Because, if you're after something specific or you've got very specific requirements, you're better off going down that way.
The elevator thing is a really good thing to think about. And I mean, it's not just Italy. I just had some friends who were in Spain a few weeks ago, and their hotel room was on the 6th floor with no elevator. You have to kind of factor that in. So when you're booking, really check into that and see. And I find most of the time in Rome and to a degree in Florence, there'll be some kind of elevator. In Venice, it can go any which way. I mean, I might be wrong, but in my experience, there are vastly fewer elevators in Venice than there are in other places. And then as you're moving out around the country, it's a coin toss. So really look into that when you're booking, or especially if you're booking in a place where it could be a high floor. If you have to go up one flight of stairs, you can complain, and most of us can get our suitcase up a flight of stairs. But if you're going up to a 3rd or 4th floor with all your luggage, that can be a game changer.
There's things to consider for sure. And like another one I think you mentioned was a TV. Like, you get Italian, there's no dubbing. You get the Italian TV, which is notoriously terrible. And if you're in a hotel, you sometimes get the BBC or CNN or something like that, but not always.
I've found lately with the Airbnb model, with vacation rentals, tons of them have had like Netflix and some of those streaming services on them, so you can watch some stuff in English.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really plan on watching too much TV.
Why are you in Italy to watch TV anyway? Let's be real.
Exactly. I had a couple of other things. We talked about towels. When you're in a vacation rental model, so villa, a lot of times on a masseria, if you're staying in an apartment, like there's a lot of these non-hotel options where there'll be some toilet paper there when you get there, but you're kind of expected to go out and get some if you need it. And that can be something that can completely undo people. I'm like, no, like if it's not a hotel, they're not going to keep filling it up every day. You will need to go to the store and pick it up.
I find that a bit strange. I think, like, just provide the toilet paper. But you're right, it doesn't happen there.
Yeah, I see it a lot. I guess I'm so used to everything. To be fair, to buy a full pack of toilet paper is €1.85. So it's not breaking the bank at all. And like a lot of the places that I stay will have stacks of toilet paper and you never have to even think about it. But just know, like, you may have to go and buy that. Very few places that I've ever stayed in have had American-style drip coffee makers. They might have a mocha or they might have an espresso machine or something like that, but not that many will have, how American coffee drips into the big jug thing?
We've moved on. We're espresso drinkers here.
Yeah, so at home, I don't drink that type of coffee, so I don't even notice it. But to a lot of people, that's how they make their coffee in the morning. And so that's something to think about because an espresso is very much stronger.
Well, you can do what we do when we go to France, which they have terrible coffee in France. It's the worst. It tastes disgusting. I don't know what they do to it. But you can take instant, or if you're a real coffee person, you can bring AeroPress.
You can. And instant, you can get instant in those little single serve things. Even going to Starbucks, they have these little packets of single serve instant if you need it. And here in the States, the supermarkets you can buy little boxes of single serve sachets of instant coffee. And, that'll get you through if you're someone that really doesn't enjoy an espresso.
So many good tips, Corinna. So many. I mean, we could talk about this for ages. Maybe we should go back and do 10 top tips. I don't know. We'll come back and revisit accommodation at another time because I think you can go into it for ages and it is really, really important to get it right. It makes a big impact to your trip. The only other thing that I wanted to mention was just please, if you're traveling in the summer in 2024, just get onto that ASAP. The best properties get booked up 6 to 12 months in advance. And also I've noticed a lot of surge pricing happening in the busier months. So one of the hotels that I stay at in Florence is normally around €300 a night and it goes up to €1,000 a night. So surge pricing is well and truly happening in the big major areas. And, if you get in the early bird offers, you're going to be much better off.
Definitely very much better off. And the last 2 years have been more tourism than I've ever seen before. So 22, I was like, this is the most I've ever seen. And then 23 was even more. I think it's going to be the way of the world for a while. So book your accommodation as soon as possible. Think it out. See if you can mix it up a little bit. Do a couple of different options. Think about your location, how far away from all the action you want to be. But also think about being a little bit far away from all the noise.
The other thing I wanted to mention, though, is I had some clients that were getting a little bit agitated because there wasn't availability around the October-November timeframe for the following year. And you need to know that a lot of, especially the smaller establishments, don't put their availability until the season's finished for the previous year. So that means they might not get around to doing it until late October-November timeframe, putting in their availability. So some of the places we use, they have, we haven't done our pricing. And I'm like, what? You need to get onto that one. There's all these little quirks about traveling in Italy. It's what makes it fun.
It used to be that by mid-September, that was the end of the season, like when all the kids went back to school in Europe. Like September 15th used to be the end of the season. Now the season is still rocking and rolling at, November 1st. So you're not going to get that dip in the shoulder that you were before.
Fortunately not. Well, Corinna, it's always a pleasure to have you here with us on the show. And what I wanted to say was you're always welcome on the podcast, but let's just say our listeners can't wait until the next time that they hear you on Untold Italy. How can they stay in touch with what you're doing?
The best way is to go to my website, which is CorinnaCooke.com. I have a newsletter on there that you can sign up for. It comes out like once a month, sometimes twice a month. It tells you about different random interesting things in Italy. And then my socials, I'm really mostly on Instagram, and I'm there as @Corinna Travels. And all those links and everything are all on the website. Yeah, those are the best ways to keep on top of what I'm doing. And then my books are available worldwide on Amazon. All 4 are bestsellers.
I know. We're so proud of you. And, of course, we'll put all those links into our show notes as well. Oh, Corinna, thank you for chatting with me again.
Oh, thank you for having me back, and thank all of you for listening.
Oh, I hope to see you very soon in person. Let's figure that out.
Yeah, I think we'll be over there at the same time before too long.
Oh, grazie, Corinna. Thank you.
Ciao.
So there's lots to think about when it comes to booking your accommodation, isn't there? I spend a lot, probably too much time reviewing and assessing things these days, such that a shower curtain instead of a glass screen is likely to get me to delist a hotel for consideration. I don't know why that's trendy again, but those things are difficult to clean and I find them a bit icky. Anyway, I do find the accommodation selection of any trip so important, and I can forgive myself mistakes on other things, but not that. So if you're struggling a bit with it, I hear you. But remember, nothing is perfect and you'll eventually find something suitable. Just please don't leave things to the last minute if you're traveling this summer. Now, if you need some suggestions on where to get started, we create many accommodation guides on our website with fully vetted options for hotels and apartments. You'll find articles with our recommendations from Rome to Venice, Amalfi Coast, and smaller spots like Lucca and Verona. We tend to group this by budget and travel style, so if you're a family looking for accommodation, the places we recommend will have 4 proper beds as an example, because I don't know about you, but I think my kids deserve not to sleep on a sofa bed. We will put a link to these guides into the show notes at untolditaly.com/207 for episode 207, as well as all the tips Corinna provided for finding your perfect stays in Italy and all her details as well, because you definitely want to stay in touch with what she's doing. Now, for those of you who want personalised assistance and access to our very favourite places to stay, we just launched our very own Untold Italy trip planning services. Our amazing team of Italy travel experts on the ground in Italy and around the world are ready to help you plan your dream Italian trip. You can choose from a service that helps you refine your itinerary or even help you start if you're completely overwhelmed. We'll advise on logistics and transport and, of course, accommodation and get you all organised for an amazing time in Italy. You can find out more and book in for a consultation on our website at untolditaly.com/services. Grazie. Thanks to all our wonderful listeners for your ongoing support of Untold Italy. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, then it would be wonderful if you gave us a rating or review in your favourite podcast app. That way we can reach more Italy travel lovers just like you. Next week on Untold Italy, we're returning to beautiful Venice and I'm chatting with my dear friend Monica about the amazing craftspeople of the city. But until then, it's ciao for now.
The Untold Italy podcast is an independent production. Podcast editing, audio production and website development by Mark Hatter, production assistance and content writing by the other Katy Clarke. Yes, there are 2 of us. For more information about Untold Italy, please visit untolditaly.com.